So it's muscle car city in here today.
Beautiful.
They're all little jobs, but they focus on engine power. So it's a perfect time for Dave to be out of the garage this morning, since lately he prefers Coachwork over power. So Dave's been focusing on a new hobby, which is actually turning into a side business for him.
I have a passion for just about anything mechanical and interesting. I have always liked watches. I bought a couple of watches, I bought a couple more. Then I started taking some of them apart, and that fascinated me. So now I sort of dove into the inside of watches, and I've been learning how they work. And instead of cars, and tractors, and airplanes, everything else I've always collected, you can put all kinds of these in one drawer. And this one is still running.
So this is a 1967 Mustang convertible. Right now it's just a plain 6-cylinder with a 3-speed manual transmission. The fellow bought this car and he wants to do an engine swap, put a big Coyote V8 in it. But he wants to drive it for a couple of weeks as it is with the 6-cylinder and just to see what it's like. So we're doing a quick brake job on this car, and then him and his wife can tool around with the 6-cylinder for the transformation when he gets it with the big engine in and what it's going to be like.
What happened was the owner of this car brought us in another Ford product. It was more or less a basket case 68 Mustang. Somebody was modifying it to fit a new frame off of a 97 Lincoln, I guess it is. A lot of work's been done, and I think it was done by a couple of different people by the looks of things. Some of the gentlemen that were doing the metal work on it, I think, retired, and he wanted somebody to finish the project for him. The original plan was to get it so that we could use the suspension and the braking system that was on the Lincoln and kind of put it back together so it looked like an Eleanor. Eleanor was the name given to a car in the Gone in 60 Seconds movies, and it was a really done-up GT500 Shelby Mustang. It made that car very popular, and now everybody wants one. And that was his goal. He wanted an Eleanor convertible instead of the fastback or hardtop. Some of it is interesting. This is a nose piece that they started to attach to this fiberglass fender on the front, but they're trying to mount glass onto glass there, and the only bad part about that is these things are a little expensive. Now, this angle on the windshield frame is a little bit off as well, and it's gonna have to be because, like, see, they've added a section through the middle of the door to lift it up so that it matches the height of the chassis that they were trying to use. With the depth of the floor and the 2 inches added into the side, you'd be sitting in the car like this with your arm up on the seat. You know, feel like a 4-year-old sitting in your grandfather's Lincoln. He would have liked us to put it together and finish it in his vision, but it was just too far gone from what we could see. You know, partial floors are in, partial tunnel is in. There's no room for a gas tank. Every build, you always start with the chassis, you always start with the base. As soon as your lines are right on it, then you can go ahead and start building on top. If you were building a house and you built the 2nd story first and then tried to do the basement, it's doing it the wrong way. So our idea was to find a solid 67 Mustang convertible. We can modify it because they actually manufacture the parts to put a Coyote motor in. Then we can put a 4-link in the back. We can put the right suspension in the front of it. There's only probably a couple things we could use off of the basket case. Maybe the hood and nose piece on it. I'm not sure what's gonna happen to the basket case afterwards, but I mean, make great lawn graffiti or something like that. And going this route is gonna save him thousands and thousands of dollars in fabrication. It blows your mind how much money can be spent in fabrication. You don't wanna get a $250,000 Mustang.
So I'm at home today, and I'm teaching myself how to repair watches.
He's obsessed with watches, with finding them, buying them, fixing them.
Everybody knows that I've been collecting tractors and fooling around with them. But you know, in the wintertime, tractors aren't as much fun as they are in the summertime. So I started collecting watches. And not only collecting them, but I'm collecting all the tools and everything watchmakers use. Yeah, it's a little bit like being a mad inventor.
Watches don't do much for me. I'm never on time. I don't care about time. But Dave, he's all about time.
I've always liked watches, but I didn't realize I was a watch collector until I realized that I had like 25 or 30 watches. And I went, holy cow, you're collecting the damn things. Some of them were cheap, some of them were nice, not huge money, but then I started to dive into the world of watches. And I mean, it's just like the world of cars. There's cheap ones, there's expensive ones, there's popular ones, and there's really rarefied air. So I've launched my own antique jewelry business because I'm stupid, called David Charles Collections. I thought, well, maybe if I get a bunch of watches, I can sell those. And then they don't work because they're 200 years old, so let's take them apart. I got so many watches in pieces now, it's getting a little ridiculous.
What am I gonna do? Like, you know, I know this guy pretty good by now.
So,
You roll with it. Roll with the Rolex.
so far, I've got like a 30-70 success rate, and not to the successful side. But that said, I have managed to get some cleaned. Not like a car engine. Everything's really small. But I find that fascinating. I mean, 100, 200, 300 years ago, they were all made by hand. All the gears and all these, you know, tiny, tiny things you can barely see. You know, you drop a screw, forget finding it. I mean, honest to God, they're like little dust motes. So this is the first thing you take off. This is the balance wheel, and this has the balance spring on it, which is a little hairspring, just to keep it safe. And then it's just a matter of dismantling the rest. So let's just take these gears off. Depending on what a watch's function is, the more things it can do, and they're called complications with watches. The more complications on a watch, the more gears you've got, because everything is mechanically driven. Okay, so this is the thing. If you don't think your way through everything, you can lose things. And this little thing is the seconds hand. I mean, I can, you know, pretty much look at most cars and determine what I think is wrong with them. Usually get pretty close to the mark. But watches were just a whole new world of mystery. But a tiny, tiny little machine. It's what I do on a microscopic level. So what's not to like?
So, where's the pickup in this thing?
It's got pickup.
That's it?
You step on it. So we got to take this beautiful 200 six-cylinder out to put, what, 500 horse? Guarantee we'll be putting some power brakes in there to slow them down.
Working on a 1980 Trans Am, 4.9 liter turbo.
The gentleman brought it in, it was smoking really bad. The turbo seals were gone in it.
And we rebuilt the turbo. So we took the top of the motor all off. I'm just about finished here. I'm just gonna put the breather back on. Now this Firebird Trans Am isn't an ordinary one. It's an official pace car. And the Speedo says it's got 88,355 kilometers on it.
It's got original tires on it, original paint, original interior. It's like a little time capsule.
And that's your fire chicken. That's what they call these back in the 80s, your breathing fire chicken.
The special Pontiac Turbo Trans Am Pace Car Edition was chosen to be the pace car in both the Indianapolis 500 and the Daytona 500 in 1980. It was the first time in 11 years that the same manufacturer was chosen to run the pace car in both races the same year. Pontiac made 5,700 of the Turbo Trans Ams available to the public. And the big change that year was they went from 165 horsepower to the 210 horsepower 4.9 liter turbo engine. This car's gonna be driven. He's gonna put a few miles on it. He's gonna be ginger, because the 70s and early 80s cars are starting to come up in value. And if he keeps the mileage low on this one, then it's gonna be worth something, you know, in a short period of time. It's all back together. Turbo's all back on. Everything looks good.
Yeah, I just hooked up the battery.
So she should fire right up then.
Well, I hope so.
Well, let's see what she sounds like.
Okay.
Give that beast a crank.
Okay, clear.
Whoa, you didn't even let it turn over, it fired right up. So surprisingly, this repair on the Trans Am was pretty straightforward. So I just need to take it for a spin and test the turbo. The interesting thing about this car is instead of having a turbo boost gauge, it has a set of sequential lights that are mounted right on the hood.
Okay, so take this thing out,
Absolutely.
give it a run. Oh, what's this? Sorry, no riders except blondes, brunettes, and redheads. What about white-haired chicks?
I'd say I'm picky, but
All right.
that's a lie.
You're not picky.
It's charging, we got good oil pressure. Hey, gas gauge works. These are all the good things.
Looks good. Okay, gun it.
You hear that?
Yeah.
That was like peeled right out.
Really? So we're in the pace car, take a run
Give it a
and
first
see what's
run,
going
see
on.
what's, see what's working and what's not working. We got a couple little things that they're gonna have to go over. I don't see the tack working, but for the most part, it hasn't died yet. So the 1980 Pontiac Trans Am, about 210 horse is what they were rated at. At the wheels, it was about 150. I mean, the pace car edition, they're an iconic 80s vehicle. This one here is just something else. I mean, this is all factory. You know, we got the machined facing on stuff. I mean, this is original paint on this car too. We just did a few touch-ups on the fender flares and stuff just to make them match. What's great is we're driving down the road. There's not a wind noise in the car.
No, that's true. A lot of smells going on in here, eh?
Yeah.
Oh, it's the mothballs.
Oh,
No,
the
fuck me.
mothballs. It's been in storage for years, hence the mothball smell inside.
So what's the backstory? How come the guy wanted to bring it out of the garage now?
Well, I guess he's had it stored for years and years and years, and I think his wife finally said, hey, you
Do
need to
something
get this
with it.
thing on the road.
Do something with it,
Yeah.
or right. So, where's the pickup in this thing?
It's got pickup.
That's it?
Yeah, you step on it. You can hear the little turbo coming up. So those are the turbo lights, so when you step on it, it changes from normal to medium to high turbo charge.
Oh, so you can watch it
Yeah,
go.
so you step on it. See?
Ah,
Foot to the floor, the turbo feels pretty good. Everything's pulling really well.
well, for sitting in a garage, this thing really got a bit of guts, eh?
Yeah, it's a great car to drive. Decent power, and the handling on these cars was great.
I wish we could have got it up to full turbo for 3 lights.
No.
Not before the bend. And the brakes work, which is good.
Well, that was a good idea to check them now.
There's no better time to check the brakes when you're going 100 kilometers over the speed limit.
Was that 100? No.
Sure felt like it. Come
that's
on,
crazy.
it felt like it.
That'd
It was
be like flat out. I'm kind of half-assed happy, which is not
My God.
normal for me.
It's not a feeling you tap into very often.
No.
We're doing a quick brake job on this 1967 Mustang convertible. So we're just doing enough to get the thing to pass the safety so we can drive it for the few weeks. So it needed a couple of wheel cylinders, and one on the front was leaking, one on the rear was leaking. You see, this is a drum brake on this car. You step on the brakes, it pushes the hydraulic brake fluid, the wheel cylinder pushes out and expands the shoes into the drum, stops the car. They don't make cars with drum brakes anymore. Everything's got disc brakes. They stop better. But a good setup drum brake works just fine too. There's a little grease in there. Now you have to get the wheel bearing adjusted properly. Can't have it too loose. You can't have it too tight. So it's just a feel you gotta feel with it. You get all the play out of it. It feels good, nice and tight. And we put in a new cotter pin so the wheel doesn't fall off. That's a good thing, right? Here we go. Just have to adjust them up. With the drum brakes, you have to keep them in adjustment. If you don't have them adjusted properly, you have a really low pedal. So you got to step on the brakes and they got to come out before they touch. So this way, they touch right away. They do self-adjust, but not really that efficiently. There now, you can feel a little bit of drag. And again, it's just the feel of it. That's what I want, right there. All righty, we just bring her down.
Whew. Look at all the power in there. So we got to take this beautiful 200 6-cylinder out, 120 horse, to put, what, 500 horse and 480 foot-pounds of torque in or something? So a few modifications, because the Coyote won't fit in here.
No.
So these have to come out. We got to take the shock towers out,
Yeah.
put a lower and upper control arm system in it.
So the car's gonna handle a lot better too when we finish with it.
Guarantee we'll be putting some power brakes in there to slow down.
Yeah.
To-
Why does he want to go that route? Why don't we just put a nice stroker, 351 stroker motor?
He already bought it. He bought the motor and transmission.
Oh, okay, he's got it already.
Yeah. So we're gonna put a fairing kit on it, a nose piece like the Eleanor, and a paint job and get it set up for what he wants. It'll be flying after that.
I really don't see anywhere on this car where they could have done it any better. There's just nothing wrong with this car. So you've been busy since I went out.
Yeah, we had a few nice muscle cars come in. We got a nice little Z28 Camaro.
Well, yeah, I mean, the shop's filled between Corvettes and Camaros and Mustangs right now. There's not much room for anything else. It's almost like we're a specialty shop. You know, I'd love to know how many Camaros I've done in 30 years.
We get one in, it seems like they're breeding, and all of a
Well, I've
sudden we
always
have
said
three.
things come in threes, but you know, 25, 30 years ago, when things came in threes, it'd be like 3 1934 Derbyshire Bentleys in at the same time. There's only 3 in Canada. But with this, it's like 3 orange ones, 3 blue ones, 3 gold ones.
I've restored literally hundreds, maybe thousands of muscle cars. So these days, I'm sort of appreciating the European sophistication and technology in cars a little more.
In Europe, car manufacturers quite often had a tradition of just building a chassis and driveline. They had nothing to do with what a car looked like. On the whole, it was up to aftermarket manufacturers to create cars to a customer's taste. That's something that rarely happened in North America. For the most part, cars were mass-produced here. But in Europe, a lot of the higher-end cars were basically designed in small design houses and hand-built to basically please the owner. And, you know, Delahaye and Delahaye and Bugatti in France, and Lancia, and after the war, Ferrari in Italy. Now, they'd had some standard designs, but, you know, if you wanted an Alfa Romeo, you would go and buy an Alfa, and then you would take it to a carrossier, and you would have them build the car that you wanted. This is a 1967 Series 2 Fiat Dino Spider Pininfarina. And it came in for basically a mechanical refurbishing, get the engine rebuilt, detail the engine compartment, and just go through and make sure it's a good, safe driving car. The wonderful thing about that is I get to spend time looking at it. I really don't see anywhere on this car where they could have done it any better. You can see a design that starts out fairly dramatically and just flows into the rest of the car. It's got these rising fenders, the body is exactly the right proportions. There's just nothing wrong with this car. I am a devotee of Italian Coachwork. They make cars that were just sensuous, tactile. You want to touch them. The owners don't want you to, but you want to. And that's what I like about Italian cars. They're just a sort of innate sexiness that nobody else produces. One of my favorite Italian design houses is Pininfarina. Pininfarina was probably the greatest creator of Ferraris. Ferrari would come up with an idea for a design. Pinin would do up a series of drawings, give it back to Ferrari. They would go, oh, I really like that. And they would produce the car. The Dino name was used by both Ferrari and Fiat as an homage to Dino Ferrari, the son of Enzo Ferrari, who had passed away. Unlike true Ferraris, the Dino had a 6-cylinder engine in it, and unlike Fiat's, where it had usually 4-cylinder engines, this had a 6-cylinder engine. Fiat Dino was always the poor cousin, and I sort of prefer this even to the Ferrari Dino. Whether I'm ever going to have one of these or not, I don't know, but I certainly wouldn't mind. It's just a dramatically beautiful car, almost to the point of arrogance. You look at everybody else and you go, so sorry that you're driving that bloody Japanese thing. So at the same time that Fiat had the Dino coming off the assembly lines, a very different kind of car, the Bristol, was coming off assembly lines in England. You know, one of the great things about what I'm doing is that I get to come across lots of cars that most people never get the opportunity to see. This is one of those. It's a Bristol 411. You know, this one comes in probably once a year just for general maintenance. You know, these cars do not like to sit over winter time, and when they come out in the spring, they generally have a few small issues that have to be attended to. Lovely car. I really have a soft spot for these sort of eccentric British luxury cars of the 50s and 60s. That's not going to be an issue getting it out. In the First World War, a lot of aircraft manufacturers ended up just going bust right after the war because nobody needed airplanes. The chairman of the Bristol corporation that was making the Bristol Beaufighters and other British warcraft decided that he didn't want to see that happen, so he founded a British car division of Bristol and continued making cars after the war. The coachwork on the cars was British made. The interiors is sumptuous British leather and wood, very Rolls-Roycean. But one of the things I really, really like is the steering wheel. It's got hand grips on it, which forces you to drive it completely inappropriately by the yokes. And it's got this beautiful badge with a castle and a galleon. I kept on looking down and thinking, this is nice. Don't pay attention. Yeah. They had American power plants. I think this one is a Chrysler 460. They used a big American engine, which were reliable and easy to service and everything, and married it to all this beautiful coachwork. And of course, the absolute best part of cars like these isn't just looking at them and opening the hood, it's driving them. So let's do that. Let's take it for a drive. Well, I'm gonna take it for a drive. You don't get to. The only car other than a Rolls Royce that when you get into it, it smells just like a Rolls Royce. That's nice. Kind of car I could easily fall in love with. And from a manufacturer who made some of my favorite airplanes of all time. Well, that's funny because as much as this car smells like a Rolls Royce, if I was blindfolded and driving, I would actually say I was driving a Rolls Royce. It actually has some, can I say balls? Yeah, it's got some balls when you get on it. Like it sort of wallows around a little bit because, you know, you don't want to shake the sherry in the back seat around too much. So, and it sounds great. I mean, it just has this beautiful mellow noise. You're sort of disassociated from the road. You're disassociated from like the driving because you're just floating down the road, you know? It's silky. It's just a dramatically beautiful car. What else can you say about something like that? Keeps on going in this beautiful, stately fashion. Almost to the point of arrogance. There's no doubt about it. You look at everybody else and you go, oh, yes, well, yeah, I'm so sorry that you're driving that lovely Japanese thing.